Welcome everyone to Latter Daily Digest. We honor creators, and today we have a special creator, Jessie Frenkel. Nice to have you on the show.
Thank you.
Hi, Jessie. Welcome.
Thank you.
And I'm going to let Randy talk about what your specialty is.
You know, when I was new to the post-Mormon community, which has only been a few years ago, looking on the internet, I was looking for people that I loved their content. And Jessie's content was not only consistent and frequent, but very relevant to entering into the post-Mormon world. And she makes so many incredible points. And she doesn't just express her opinion, but she provides a lot of documentation, and it's just really helpful. It was very helpful to me. So I friend requested her. She was one of the first friend requests I did.
Thank you.
Yeah. And so we're really happy to have you on the show. It's so good to put a face with the content.
Agreed.
That's right. So Jessie, give us 5 or so minutes of growing up in Germany, right?
Yes. So I grew up in Germany, born in a Mormon family. My father's side is actually 4th generation, and all Germans. No intermingling with some Americans, stationing in Germany or something, like all German. And even my mom's side, her parents were already Mormon, so no converts in my family. And I have one more brother, and we were born in the church, so far so good. And then when I was, I would say 5 or 6 years old, my parents got divorced. My mom didn't want to be Mormon anymore. She left the faith, had relationships. So then my parents' marriage fell apart. An interesting thing that I just kind of learned recently was that I knew my dad was excommunicated. I never knew why, since I knew my mom officially would be the one who had the affair. And I asked my dad, and I was like, why were you actually excommunicated? And he said, well, the bishopric kind of said, since he's out in the dating world again, that it would be easier if they excommunicate him now. So then if he would have sexual relations with women, they don't have to deal with this. Kind of, he can just do his thing. And then when he get married, he can come back to membership and get baptized, and everything is good, I guess.
Wait, time out. Am I understanding that he got pre-excommunicated so he could do his thing and enjoy and, kind of live, eat, drink, and be merry? And then once he'd experienced, sex with his new partner and everything, then get rebaptized and everyone's back to square one? Really?
Pretty much. That's how I understood it.
I can't wait to see that bishop's manual.
Me too.
Notations in the side. And it reminds me of the Amish. They have like the devil's playground, right?
Here you go.
Let the young to just go explore, do whatever you want.
Yes.
And then come back to the fold when you're ready to be full-fledged Amish. So that's
the difference is my dad was already married.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Nice.
I don't know. I know the bishopric. Obviously, since I was in that ward and I was a child, and I would say they were good men. And looking backward, maybe they were really liberal and maybe really nuanced. And in a theoretically way, I would say there is some goodness to it. I'm not sure that's really the Mormon way, but that's what it was.
Well, it's kind of like when you get samples, you go into the mall and they have all these different restaurants in the food court. They give you samples that you don't have to pay for. You just see if you like it or not. And then when you're ready to eat, then you order the full meal and pay for it. I'm digging this idea.
I know, right?
Church, yeah.
That's a new twist on cafeteria Mormonism.
Yes. There we are.
I see what you did there.
Yes, for sure. So, but back in the day, obviously, I didn't know any of this. So then I'm here, this little Mormon girl, right? And what's the dream of every Mormon child? To be baptized by your dad. So that was my dream as well. But that wasn't going to happen because my dad was excommunicated and it would take too long. So I was finally 9 or close to 9. So they were like, hey, you know how they are. They don't like when the kids get much older than that. So they were talking about, hey, could maybe somebody else do it? Or how about we do this special day? Because at the end of the day, when I was baptized, my dad was baptized, my stepmom was baptized, and I was baptized. So they kind of made it this way, like, how about we just do it this way? This way is still special that your dad is there. But you know how it is, like even after baptism, it takes a while for a man to get the priesthood and everything. So it would even take longer for him to finally baptize me. So I kind of were persuaded by that and picked somebody from the bishopric who then baptized me. And it was, like I said, all three of us at the same date.
That's right.
I love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, it's kind of like bittersweet still, because I still felt like still the odd duck. Like nobody does that. Nobody gets baptized with their dad, especially since he was a Mormon. It was not a convert baptism, right? It wasn't like our whole family found Mormonism and now we all got baptized. So it was this bittersweet kind of odd kind of thing, but still we all back in the fold, right? So all is good in Zion.
And in primary in Germany, are you learning the articles of faith?
Yes, yes. We do all the same song, the popcorn song, right? We learned this. And I would say it's pretty similar. The seminary, I want to say primary in the US than in Germany. Maybe we don't have all the songs because they always need to translate it, right? It has to fit with the words. But mostly I would say it's the same. And as a kid, you know, my brother went, I went, my family went, you go, and they're doing some fun stuff. But I would say our ward was on the borderline between a branch and a ward. We were officially a ward, but it was a really, really small one. I would even say like a lot of members in our ward struggled financially, weren't like super strong in general in life. So that was always a little challenging being a Mormon, kind of like this prosperity gospel, but it doesn't really work for most of our members. And some families, which I now learned recently too, right, especially outside of Utah, they carry the ward, right? You have like 3-4 families, they carry the ward, and then you have, I would say, random citizens, so to speak. So that was our ward. And then interesting too, which just coincidence, in our ward, we were literally like 2 girls my age, 2. And we were almost like same age, like literally born same month, same year. So for that matter, it worked, and we kind of really got along. We're still best friends to this day. But that's how small it was. And then there were boys who were my brothers or her brothers and some others. So very, very small. Which then also a lot of kids struggle, because if you don't find friendship in your ward, those are the first to leave, right? Because it's just not fun. But I was in that matter lucky, blessed. I had that girl, my friend, and we kind of pushed through together. Then came teenage years. Obviously, I don't know, at least my generation, I feel the 80s and 90s, Germans in general thought America's cool. Everything from America is cool, right? So that kind of helped with Mormonism, that American aspect in those years. It's definitely now, but definitely in my years, it was this kind of like, we all have those cool cousins in America, right? Those Mormons are kind of our cousins. But
Is that kind of residual from America helping win World War II,
yes,
even though you're in the defeated country?
yes, but still, like, I think Germans see the Americans more like they were our saviors, right? They saved us from fascism, right? So it wasn't a bad thing that they came. But also, I would say in the 80s and 90s, if you think about it, even in Germany, most movies were Hollywood, right? Most pop songs, Michael Jackson, Prince, whatever you name it, they were Americans, right? They were those big buster, cool guys and gals, right? So it was
Randy Watts.
Yes.
Randy C. Watts, yeah. Right.
Randy C. Watts.
And clothing too, right? Like fashion, like Levi Strauss jeans. Like we had to get them from the PX, right? The military base. We had some friends, they got them cheaper instead of the expensive ones in Germany, and so on and so on.
Just like how people are getting the shorter sleeve garments now from people from other countries.
Yeah. Isn't that funny how that goes? So true. So that, I think, for the 80s and 90s for a lot of Mormons was helpful. Kind of like this influence, this coolness. Like everybody wanted to go to Utah, which is funny. Nobody outside of Mormonism wanted to go to Utah, right? It's California, New York, Florida. And the Mormon kids like, I want to go to Utah. Most Germans were even like, where is Utah? What is Utah? Nobody knows Utah. I mean, it's just how it is, right? Then I
now,
get it.
Were you thinking about serving a mission at all?
No, back then, I'm being here really crass now, but back then it was the ugly girls went on missions, right? If you didn't find a guy, you went on a mission.
We call them
If not,
sweet
no.
spirits in America.
Yes.
And burning testimonies.
Yes, exactly. But your goal was rather finding a guy, right? Getting married, right? So I was in my teenage years. I never struggled, I have to say, with drugs, alcohol, even though in Germany it's legal when you're 16, at least beer is legal. But I mean, maybe I tried once, it's super bitter, right? It's not even tasty, where you're like, oh, it tastes so good and I can't have it. So I never struggled with that, to be honest. I had a friend who had an alcoholic dad, so obviously that was an example where you're like, no, this is bad, right? But I have to say, I always like the smell of coffee. In a lot of bakeries in Germany, you have this like rich, warm smell of coffee. And I always was like, oh, I wish I could drink coffee.
Right.
A lot of Germans drink tea. That's a lot of teas. And obviously, like at least in Germany, Mormons are like, it's just the green and black tea. So all the fruit teas you can drink legally, so to speak, as a Mormon. And we do drink a lot of tea. But it was this tiny bit of confusion always, right? Where you're like, why, what's in the black tea? But it was more like, just be obedient, right? Like, don't question it. It's just what it is. And it wasn't a real big deal with the black tea. So whatever. So that was not a big deal. But I did have boyfriends who were not members. And that was always pushing the limits, right? Was Law of Chastity. And then I remember I heard the first time, I don't think anyone says it anymore in Mormonism. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but back then it was petting and nicking, the words, right? That you were not allowed to do.
Heavy petting, yeah.
Yes. And I was always like, kind of, what is this actually? Like, I mean, in Germany, I would say we're pretty open with sexuality and naked bodies. There's not like, I know my mom went to naked beaches. I went as a child. It wasn't a big deal. It was nothing sexual, like, at all. So that's not, it was really more, the shame was, for me, more centered in Mormonism, in my religion. It didn't exist outside of it, because I would say in general, Germans are pretty natural with bodies. Like, little kids run around in public pools naked when they're 2 or 3. Nobody like breaks a sweat about this. So it was kind of concentrated for me in Mormonism, where I was like, I should maybe wear something else when I go to church. But outside it's fine. So it was this kind of, always like tug and tug, like, well, what does work, what doesn't? But it was more like always like, it's just in church, they don't like it.
Right. Did your boyfriends tempt you then?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, yes, as a Mormon, I would say so. Now being out, I would say, I mean, girls are as sexual as boys. So it's not that I didn't like it. It's not that anyone forced at all on me. So not at all. So I like kissing. I like making out, right? So, but that was more a thing where I struggled where the limits are, right? Like, when do you need to talk to a bishop? What is okay and what is not okay? And also, the culture is really different. So we don't use the word dating. We don't have in Germany, even as Mormons, I feel now, funny enough, they're more conservative than back then, because when I grew up, 16 was nothing. There was no meaning to it. So we didn't understand why American Mormons have the 16. Like, well, what is it about 16? And everybody dates when they're 13, 14. Obviously, you don't do maybe as much making out than when you're 15, 16, but it doesn't need to be, there's nothing to talk about. It's just a natural evolving, And obviously you have parents who talk to you as well, which they're really, in Germany, do. My parents.
Nothing like making a child do something than to tell them not to.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Don't eat that fruit.
Yeah, exactly. Don't think about the elephant in the room. I remember even, which I still thought it was uncomfortable, but at the end of the day, it was not a bad thing. I remember and that's the other thing. So in Germany, we don't have R-rated movies. It's more by age, and nobody takes it too seriously. And it's also about violence. So German movies are rated by violence, not by nakedness, which is interesting. It's kind of the opposite here in the States, right? You can watch with 11, the most violent movie, as long as there's no naked skin in it. And so that's different in Germany. So they don't care for naked bodies, but violence is not healthy for children. And so I as a teenager, even in my home with Mormon parents, we saw movies where there were sex scenes or something, right? And my stepmom would always say, you know what? Sometimes the women is on top, just that you know. That always was like,
That's like your sex ed.
Yes. I mean, obviously it's uncomfortable, as a teenager, but it did stick with me. And it was a good thing knowing, okay, this is not all sex, right? This is just how Hollywood portrays it, right? This kind of more male-centered sexuality. So I had boyfriends out of the church. I mean, as you can imagine, in a small ward, it's not like there were lots of cute boys, and the stake is really geographically huge, so you don't see many of the other Mormons so much. And it's obviously easier in your neighborhood, in your school, to have a crush on a boy. And so that was definitely my struggle, was more the sexuality and how far to go. Then, like I mentioned, I was in Park City as a nanny after I did my Abitur, so after high school. And it was an official organization. So it was not like I wanted to be with Mormons or whatever, or I wanted to go to Utah. That's not even a thing. You cannot make that decision. They kind of give you a family.
So you got like a lucky draw.
Yes, pretty much, right? And so I got a family from Utah, but here's the kicker. She was an ex-Mormon and he's a Catholic. I'm still in contact with them. Awesome family. Had 2 little boys. I was the nanny, and they had a thing. The mom studied German, and she wanted her kids to learn German. So they always had German nannies. That was kind of their thing.
Oh, that's cool.
Yes, I think it's a cool idea, or at least a thought. But as you can imagine, as the German nanny, we all want to learn English. So we weren't super lenient with the whole German speaking. We tried, but super nice family. Anyway, so that was 1997 was when I had my high school degree and I went to the States. So,
that's right. And Jessie, in high school, did you learn English? Was that
yes, even earlier. So in Germany, it's like you learn English. Most of the kids, I would say, at least from my experience, is 4th, 5th grade. So our elementary school does only go to 4th grade, right? And then you go to middle school. So in 3rd, 4th grade, you playfully, like with songs and learning names. For example, I got the name Pamela, which I did not like. So everybody gets English names. And you sing Old MacDonald Had a Farm, you count in English. And then in middle school, it becomes more a serious subject, right, where you learn vocabulary. And then in 6th grade, you have to choose a second language, which in Germany, normally it's French or Latin. Latin is a dead language, so most of the kids would choose French, right? So yeah, that's our English experience.
because I've noticed you speak English really well. In fact, weller than I do.
No, I don't think so. I can tell you. So there are some funny stories because there's still some words sometimes we're not so sure how to pronounce them, right? And so one example is we just moved to San Antonio. I went with my kids to like a sweet store, kind of with like bakery stuff and everything. And we wanted to order a crepe. In German, it's a crepe. In French, pretty close. So what did I ask? How much is your crepe? My boy's like laughing on the floor, like, Mom, you don't ask anybody how much your crepe is. I'm like, well, that's what it is in German. So sometimes I still screw up.
That's funny.
You know, I have to add this, although it has nothing to do with what we're talking about. But my ex's mother was she was French, and we were in La Jolla, California, and we wandered onto the beach where all the seals are.
Yeah.
And she came over and saw the seals. And she started, she was so excited. She's screaming, fuck. And everyone's looking, I'm looking at her, and that's how you say seal, apparently, in French.
Yes.
And everyone's looking, saying, are you all right? And she's like, fuck. And everyone's looking at someone drowning. Anyway, it's funny how you have these.
Yes.
That must be why somebody says, excuse my French, because I'm just talking about seals. That's all.
I like that. Yes.
That's a good point. I never thought about that.
Yes.
Yeah. And so you're an au pair. And what do you think about Utah Mormons? Do you learn anything about Utah Mormons?
Yes.
Of course, you didn't go to. Did you go to church then without the family then?
I did, because I was a good Mormon girl, right? Of course I did to go to church by myself. And it was, I would say for a lot of outside of the US Mormons, Salt Lake is kind of that Mecca, right? This religious place to go to once in your life, to see the tabernacle. Back then it was just the tabernacle, right? And so I was in a way, obviously, kind of like, ooh, I was lucky. I got to Utah, right? Without even trying in a way. And so the first thing I noticed was like, so when you see pictures of the Mormon temple in Salt Lake, at least from an outsider, you think it's like a huge field with grass and nothing around it, just this big giant temple. And you come to Salt Lake downtown, you're like, where's the temple? All the buildings around it were bigger back then, right? It wasn't even that wide of a space as it is right now. So I was a little disappointed by the view.
And you were there in the late 1990s?
Yes, yes.
And so were they doing preparation for the Winter Olympics? That was 2002, I believe.
Yes. Especially in Park City and Canyon, right? Like all the preparation for the slopes and everything. Not so much in Salt Lake, I would say, but up there for the skiing events. Yes, yes.
I know they redid all the freeway matrix in a lot of it in the valley.
I even got a T-shirt. They already had T-shirts, so yes.
Oh, nice.
Speaking of shirts, really quickly, I have to say I admire your shirt.
Oh, thank you.
I love that shirt.
It has a little heart.
Yes.
And it has a rainbow. It's almost like I'm free to fly.
Yes.
As an LGBTQ supporter or whatever.
Exactly.
And I appreciate how you've decorated your home too.
Thank you.
I love that. I did the same thing. I've got lights on my house and the pride flag waving. And yeah, I meant to say something about your shirt. Thank you, Gene, because I love that shirt. I'm going to get that shirt for next year.
Amazon.
Yeah.
I like it too. Yeah, I mean, I just recently posted. I mean, that just literally happened, I believe, yesterday or the day before, where I almost thought, June is almost over. Should I take the decoration off? And for whatever reason, I left it. And that day, I took my Amazon packages in, and there was like a little paper slip. And I first thought, is it my neighbor? Kind of like, hey, can you do me a favor, whatever, right? And I was like, oh, somebody left a paper, and no, what is it? And so I folded it up, and somebody said, I don't remember, but kind of like, thank you for showing, my colors, greetings, a queer Amazon driver. And that just was like, all of a sudden, I'm like, okay, make a difference, because you never, I feel like here, nobody does it. I'm kind of the only house. Nobody is mad about it either, but it's just not the neighborhood where people does it. And so I was just like, oh, I did make somebody's day. So I was like, okay, I will have it for the rest of June, and then I'll take it down.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Great. And so let's see, back to your story now is you're in, we can move on from being in as an au pair in Park City, unless there's something else that's important.
Yeah, so only one tiny story. So as I mentioned, the mom was ex-Mormon, which I didn't know, right? But they were super supportive. They told me, if you want to go to church, that's fine. It's your day off anyways, you can go. And then she was still had family who were Mormon, and she had, I believe, a nephew who went to MTC. And, remember back then, everybody was invited. So she was like, do you want to go? Because, I have never been to the MTC. And I was like, sure. I never have seen the BYU campus, never been in MTC because I wasn't a missionary. And so I was like, sure, I'll come along. So we went, and that was a weird experience.
That's right. For Utah Mormons, it's kiss your loved one goodbye for 2 years.
Yes. And the awkward, I don't know if that was for you. For me, it was more like, honestly, I cannot remember a single talk. It wasn't impressive to me back then. But what I thought was so cruel in a way, you have half, the kids who say goodbye to their Utah parents, and the other half who came from somewhere far, and they were just alone. And I felt so bad that there was nobody hugging them, right? They already did that. I understand that. But still, I was like, why didn't you separate those groups, right? Why don't you have the Utah who actually have the privilege then of still saying goodbye, and the other ones don't have to see this? I just thought it was kind of cruel. Like, why don't you just separate those two groups? So that was the only thing, honestly, that I kind of take away from this. I was just like, this is an odd setting. Like, they're all saying goodbye in this meeting. Okay, this is weird. And I think my I mean, I say host mother, so kind of that's what we call those parents, right? And I think she picked up on it, and she was kind of asking me like, how do you feel? And I'm like, this is weird. And she's like, well, I don't know if you knew, but I studied at BYU. And I was like, oh, you did? And she's like, yeah. And then I was like, so how did you like it? And she's like, well, I had a weird experience. And I'm like, really? And I was like, when it comes to Mormonism, naive as they come. To me, no Mormon does bad, no abuse, no lies. Everybody's honest, a good person. So I was just like, sure, tell me about your BYU experience. And she's like, well, and then back then, especially my host mother. So when I was 18 and she was in her late 40s, right? So that's even further when she was at BYU. That was a time where women had to wear skirts and dresses, which I already thought, like, what? And she's like, yeah, that was the rule back then. And then she said that she needed money and she was working at a bar. But she's like, I didn't drink alcohol. I just gave it out. I was 21 and making money. And some of her roommates told somebody, what is the honor codex, whatever, administration, right? And told on her. So then they came in and said, you cannot do this and you need to repent. And so apparently back then, at least that was her story, was then the kids had to go on a repentance walk where they were sent out in the wilderness with a compass, no food, no drink. She's like, what was the first time in my life I ate crickets to kind of get something in my body. And they were there for 3 days to find their way back. So they dropped them at some point, I don't know, in the mountains, whatever, around Provo. And then they had to find their way back to BYU. So
that's like right out of Handmaid's Tale.
I know, right? So that was, I would say, officially my first, like, what? Are you sure? But that's so bad, right? Like somebody is vulnerable enough to share something harsh. And I really did not say sure. But in my head, I was like, can that be true? I don't think so. She might maybe misunderstood something. This cognitive dissonance, right? This can't be. But I do believe my host mother, she was a kind person, a very successful person. She was actually the finance director at the Utah hospital. So, you have a high IQ to do those jobs. So I'm like, I don't think she's lying to me. Also, why? What would be the purpose of it? She never said, don't go to church, it's bad, whatever, right? But it was the first little cricky. So that's the only story that relates kind of to my nanny experience. So
that's the first item that went up on your shelf.
Yes, for sure.
Okay.
Or I couldn't explain it, right? I was like, what?
And was it a 1-year stint in America, or how long was being a nanny?
12 months. That's exactly 12 months, right? The exchange students normally do 10 months, a school year, but as the nanny, you do 12 months.
Okay. You were probably a hot commodity back there with all the young men being German and, that
exotic
age.
I kind of closed this door real quick because I went to a family ward because that's all I knew. In Germany, there are no single wards, doesn't exist because it's just not enough members, right? So people in the family ward keep telling me like, well, you should go to the young single adult ward, right? And I was like, what is this? And just feel awkward and da-da-da. But they were kind of like, try it out. And I was like, sure, I go. And sure enough, people were like, oh, you're from Germany, you're Mormon. Do you want to go on a double date? And I was like, no. He didn't. He was like, do you want me to show you around downtown? Which to me, as a German, is really just because you're the opposite gender doesn't mean nothing. I was like, sure, why not? I had no clue. I was pretty new, still in Utah. So I was like, why not? If somebody, And so he was like, do you have a friend you want to bring? And I had another nanny friend. that's how you have this organization that helps you. But she was from Austria and Catholic. So I told him, I was like, well, I have a good friend, but she's Catholic. He's like, yeah, no problem. I bring a friend who's not Mormon. That's how the setup was, right? So Mormon girl, Mormon boy, Catholic girl. Still, I was naive enough that I was like, well, but they still just want to show us, downtown. So we went with them downtown, went to the movies, he ate something, and then this weird ice blocking, what they call it, was weird kind of to us, kind of funny, okay, whatever.
That's where you sit on ice and it slides down the mountain or something, or down a grassy knoll.
Totally weird to both of us. We were just like speaking in German, like, what the heck is that? But
Fun in
anyway,
Utah.
yeah, it's, I guess, harmless activities, whatever. But it was more like we were together because we really didn't saw this as a double date, right? And so then when we were in the car, the guys were like really quiet, and all of a sudden one guy was like, so would you be up for, meeting another time? And we both were kind of like, I don't know, maybe, I don't know. And then the Mormon guy actually did say, well, I mean, we kind of disappointed, but we thought maybe something more would come out of this. And we both were like, more what? And he's like, well, maybe a kiss. And we both were like, for what? Like, we were so confused. And that was the first and last time I went to the young single adult ward.
They thought they were getting European, what do you call it, sexual openness, and they were going to
Maybe.
score. They were going to have
Yes.
they were going to have a story for their roommates.
A
Yes.
little further downtown.
Yeah.
They wanted to go further downtown. That's nice.
Yes. So we were just like, I apologized to my friend, right? Because she was not Mormon. So I was like, I'm so sorry. I was not aware that was a double date for them. And she felt set up too, right? Because she's the default non-Mormon friend, right? So she's like, yeah, that was weird. I really don't want to do that again. I'm like, I'm sorry. I won't even go there anymore either. And it was not my vibe, the whole young single, even the ward, the whole setup, no primary, no kids. It was just not my thing. So that was another interesting Utah experience.
So yeah, no more singles ward.
No.
So you're back in Germany, and then what happens to your life from there?
So I knew already after that year that I would have an internship in a corporation in a big firm in Germany. So I did that. And I think, which is kind of normal, if you're a nanny, a lot of nannies, when you have that experience, a lot of them, you just like, wow, whew. I mean, that's a lot of intense work with little children. So I was like, I don't want children anytime soon. Like, I loved my experience, nothing bad about it. Really great experience. But it taught me kind of like, I'm too young to have children on my own, right? So in a way, kind of a good, I guess, for a Mormon, a bad lesson. But I was really like, I'm just 20. I don't want children anytime soon. I want to do my internship. I want to concentrate on a career, and that's it. And I don't want a boyfriend anytime soon too. That was for me just like, I want to do something for me now. So I started so in Germany, you go to, it's called a job school. And that's all different kind of school if you work in a bank or an industry or even could be a hairstylist. And so you go a week to school, and then you go a week to your company and work there. And then you go a week to school and a week to company. And you do this for like almost 3 years. And then you have tests and everything. So that's kind of, a work school, job school. I don't know.
I think in America they have something called work study, where you have work and it's part of your education experience. You can get units from doing work.
But you already get paid. So we get paid by the companies that hire us, right? And it's good money. I mean, you could theoretically live off of it, but I lived as my parents' house, so I could save money and had money for my own, and it's good money. So I did that, and then so back in church in Germany, right? So people are like, well, you need to find somebody now and go on dances and blah blah, and I did, and wasn't never really my thing. So because in Germany the culture is also you go clubbing. And that's not a bad thing. Even Mormons do it. You go clubbing, you go clubs, you party. I mean, you don't need a drink, right? You can still party and dance without drinking. So I did that since I'm 16. And as you can imagine, a Mormon dance is a little in comparison, right? I mean, it's just like this should be good, wholesome dances with lights on and good music. And then also, at least back in the 80s and 90s, right, it was always couple dance. But when you go in a club, you just dance by yourself. You don't need a guy or girl per se, right? So I never was like huge on dances too, but I went more like to please my parents. And then somebody came up like, well, over 18, you need to sign up for institute. So I did seminary. I did 4 years. I graduated. So people were like, well, you did seminary. Now you need to do institute. I'm like, what's institute? And I guess, but I didn't really want to. I was honestly, I was just like, did seminary, peace out. I'm done with all that church stuff. And I'm like, now they have more. And so, but I went at some point with my best friend. We're like, okay, let's check it out. We'll, be the good girls we're supposed to be for our parents to go to institute. And in theory where I met my husband. But we met, but we weren't like really into it. And he was just telling me, hey, you know, there's a young, how do you call it, young single adult conference thing in Munich. Do you want to come? And I was like, Munich is cool. Sure, I go to Munich. So there was also like, you know, dancing and institute stuff. And that's kind of where we hit off and kind of fell in
Now,
love.
did he want to take you on a tour downtown?
Luckily not, no.
So he was a
So,
gentleman.
yes. So what we had in common, I have to add that. So my husband went on a mission and he went to Washington, D.C. So he left obviously a year earlier, but back then I didn't know really. I knew his family, but I didn't know of him or had ever had any interaction with him. So he went on this mission in 1996. I went to Utah 1997. And so we both came back 1998, right? So we both came back from an experience in the US. So that was our connection, kind of like, oh, do you miss, I mean, I'm just making up stuff now, but, you know, peanut butter. Can you imagine? We don't have peanut butter in Germany. So that was kind of, you know what I mean? Like, I miss this in the States and that was cool in the States. And so this is kind of more how we connected. It was less about his mission, more about the American experience. And so that was kind of what we talked all day long and then started dating. And we dated for 1.5 years, which is kind of long for, I would say, American Mormons, but I would say in Germany, Mormons still don't, even back then, didn't marry that fast. I know plenty of my friends who dated longer, but at some point, you know, how we all know, you know, it burns in the pan, so you have to get married.
And did you think that this young man checked the box? He went on a mission, and that was good. That was a plus.
Yes. And he came from a Mormon family, even though his parents were converts, but I didn't know this. But they were active in stake calling, so people knew of them. Yes, he was a returned missionary, right? I personally thought he wasn't bad looking either, so that was a plus too, right? But and to me, since you know I come from a divorced Mormon family, you're a little less, right? You're not as stellar as somebody maybe, so to speak, has the wholesome family, and
A
we
little,
talked.
a little tarnish on your celestial star.
Yes, right. And also, it's not even my parents were divorced. My mom left the church, right? She was, I mean, let's be like really crass and honest here. My mom was the whore, right? I did not
All
even
state
myself.
for.
Yeah, I didn't respect my mom because that's what everybody told me, and
So
I still liked her.
this is your biological mom, right?
Yes,
Okay.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. But everybody was kind of like, she's weird, you know, and she really got into this hippie vibe. Like she went on like drumming sessions and she had multiple partners and whatever. So
Pre-love.
yes. So for a Mormon, even if you're liberal, that's like crazy, right? That's really bad. So that was another thing that was always fighting in my head. Like I love my mom. She's really a fun woman, but then she does so many bad things, right? Not really. She's a good person, but in Mormonism. So that was another weird, I guess, thing for me. And also, I took it as a mark on me, right? So some Mormon man needs to like me, even though my mom is not good, right? That's not what Mormon boys dream of. So,
They
and
always
so,
said, growing up, they always said to look at the mother of the girl you're dating. And if you like the mother, then keep dating her. But if you see problems with the mother, run.
exactly.
I don't know how legitimate that is, but that's what they always told us.
Exactly, right? I mean, there are many of those stories, right? And so that was always like I felt like a little broken piece in the shelf, right? Not the perfect Mormon. I mean, I had the blonde hair, but other than that, kind of so to speak. And since also I felt still, I mean, I never, like I said, it's the weird thing. Outside of Mormonism, I never felt bad about my sexual experiences, but I knew in Mormonism that wasn't pretty cool, right? And so then when I talked with my husband, like, did you had girlfriends? And he's like, well, not really, only like, you know, some weeks here and there. So he didn't do anything. Like he was really your good Mormon boy. So then all of a sudden I felt like maybe
He only went to first base.
yes. So I felt like I didn't want to give him like a wrong impression. You know what I mean? Like I didn't want him to marry me and then like, oh, if I would have known how much experience they have, like, you know. So kind of like it was like weeks, I think, after we were engaged, or it doesn't matter. But I know one night I couldn't keep it. Like I was like, my conscience was pushing. And I was like, I need to be honest here. Like, I'm not maybe the Mormon girl you think I am. Like, I did have experience with boys and I was sexual. So what do you think? And my husband was sitting there and he didn't say anything. And he was just like, he's like, I kind of thought so when I met you, but it's okay. And I was like, okay. I mean, that also speaks to me, like, was a good guy, right? He wouldn't judge me by my past. And I was
What
like,
about him?
hmm?
What about him, his past?
Yes. So that was all he said. But I could tell there was something more, right? But I was just free. Like I was just, I got rid of my conscience, right? Like I was just happy. And I also was like, I told him, if you want to break this off, it's okay. I understand. It's okay. And he's like, no. But I knew there wasn't anything with girls, right? And so the same night he called me and it dropped a bomb. And back then I didn't know how to hold that bomb. I don't think he knew it was a bomb. But he said, well, I want to be honest too, since you were so honest. And I'm like, okay. And he said, well, there was a time in my life where my music director, so he was a really good violin player, he's like, did things to me. And I was just smacked in the face because I was all of a sudden, wait a second, I'm admitting here to heterosexual sex. What are you admitting to? You know what I mean? I didn't know how to place this. And so I kept asking questions. I'm like, what do you mean your music director? Like, he's not your age, right? And he's like, no, he's older. And I'm like, and you wanted this? Was there something to it? And he's like, no. And all of a sudden, right? I mean, like, I'm just 20, you know what I mean? I'm still a child myself. And I'm like, so you admitting to abuse? He's like, well, I guess. And that was it. We both didn't know what to do with it. And then I told him, I was like, have you talked with anybody about this? And he's like, well, I told my bishop before I went on my mission. I'm like, what did he say? Well, that I should repent. I'm like, from what?
Oh, of course.
Right? I'm like, an adult abused you and you need to repent. And he's like, well, I wanted to go on a mission. So he went on a mission, and you all know when you go on a mission, then you have, I think in the MTC once an interview, right? So same thing, the mission presidents ask him, like, is there anything, this is last minute, kind of your last chance you need to admit to? And he's like, I was still so burdened by this. So I'm like, well, I talked to my bishop, but there's this thing that happened. And it's just what happened. And the mission president said, well, if your bishop is fine with it, you're good. I'm like, so two men failed to recognize that my husband was sexually abused by a man. He was not Mormon. I mean, was from the school. And when I later asked him, actually, do you want to go to the police? Because there still might be kids being abused. And he's like, no, he died 2 or 3 years ago. So there was not much we could do.
But the other thing would be to offer mental health services, right?
Yes, we're telling him it wasn't anything to repent of, right?
Right.
But
it's the same story that we see over and over and over again. They gaslight the victim instead of helping them. Yeah.
And I asked him, have you ever told your parents? And he was like, no, and I will not. And that's the other problem, right? Most of those Mormon kids cannot open up to their parents. He told his parents now when he was 43. And what was his mom's first reaction? Are you sure? I could almost throw up. I was almost like, how dare? I mean, his dad was on the phone too, and he was like, what do you think? What do you mean? So he kind of corrected it in a good way, but still it was this, what you expect of Mormon parents, kind of doubting, right? What do you sure? What should he not be sure about? Because he had sleepovers at this director's place where his parents knew. They even went on a vacation, the whole family, his family, with this guy, not knowing what's going on between their son and that person. So to say why I said this is just, there was something in our marriage, where you have no tools as Mormons. You don't know, what to do is like, if you break the law of chastity, we all know that, but we don't know what's the difference between breaking the law of chastity and abuse.
Did that concern you?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, were there doubts placed in your mind about his intentions?
Yes. So that's what I'm saying. It was very confusing. That's why I said it felt like a bomb was dropped on my lap. That
Yeah.
all of a sudden here this little 20-year-old girl has to deal with, his parents don't know. And also, I mean, where do you go, right? As a Mormon, I'm like, maybe he liked it and he likes guys, but he needs to marry a woman, right? That's the only measurement or tool you have. I mean, I did acknowledge right away, and I was like, this sounds more like abuse, and that I think for him was the first time also a light bulb. But he always said, like, I don't like guys, right? But we know also, like, if you're closet gay, you might fight yourself, right? So that was the other thing where I'm like, maybe he cannot admit it to himself. But obviously there was, I mean, the red flag for me was just like, here is a teacher at a school who is in America it would be maybe the band director or something, right?
Right.
And then there's the student who's 15, 16.
Right. And
Right.
not
So
and
that's not a really
along with not knowing anything but chastity, we're not privy to what a healthy sexual relationship should be in marriage. We
exactly.
don't ever get that either.
Exactly. So that was, but it was just this, like, we talked about it that night, figured out it was abuse, figured out the guy's dad, there's nothing we can do. And then we literally put it in the drawer, right? Close it, done. And I mean, and we were hot and heavy. So it wasn't like he wasn't like where you're like, he's not even that into it. So I knew, I mean, we were sexually attracted. So that was okay. And he even was like, he was the good Mormon boy where he was like, I mean, we're really doing too much. I need to go to the bishop.
Okay.
And I was, with my experience, no.
Not yet. You want to go to the bishop? Let me take you there.
Let's go get excommunicated.
Exactly.
Yeah, and then we can do whatever and come back.
Yeah.
That was a model you had. Where is that bishop? I want to find that guy. Right.
No, but he was really just too good. I was like, I mean, you can go, but I'm not going because there's nothing I need to repent of. This is all
Right.
all good.
And you're planning a temple marriage. Where are you going to get married?
Frankfurt Temple, right? I mean, that was, so we're both from the Frankfurt stake. I mean, now it's called different. We all know it is. They keep changing everything, right? But back then it was the Frankfurt stake. We both were from the area, so we got married in the Frankfurt Temple. And yeah, so that was my first time. Obviously, he has been through the temple since he's a returned missionary, right? And I got only, I mean, that's what back then women did. Only when you're married, you go through the temple, right? So just a couple of weeks before my wedding, I went for the first time for the wedding. And so in Germany, you have to be aware there's not lots, but once in a while, there's a big newspaper article about Mormonism and how they're a cult, a sect, whatever. I mean, in Germany, it's just like there's only two churches. It's the Catholics and the Protestants, right? That's it. There's just two religions. Even
And
in
everything
school,
else is a cult.
yes. So everything else is a cult, right? And then Mormons have culty things. So, but we learned as Mormons, like, ignore the article, right? They don't know what they're writing about. Those are non-Mormon journalists. How should they know? I mean, it was almost softened to like, yeah, I mean, yeah, they just don't know better. That's why they're right, but it's not true. Don't worry about it. So,
And you can almost say, look, it's from America. They're Protestants with a prophet. That's all.
yes, exactly. But
You know what?
have the fight of, but we're Christians, we're not a sect, we are Christians, right? I mean, that's a fight you have in Germany, even as a teenager. Like, no, we are Christians, just a little different.
It must be like that all throughout Europe because
Yeah.
I went to Spain on my mission.
Cool.
The first thing that anybody ever said was, "Oh, it's a cult," you know, and I'm like, "No, it's not a cult," you know.
But just
They
to
were
kill
right.
people. Yeah, so I went to the Frankfurt Temple, but why I said this is constantly kind of in the back of your mind, right? Fighting against this cult mentality. No, I'm not in a cult. I'm not that stupid. I'm not brainwashed. I mean, I'm a smart cookie, right? So I go to the temple, and the first weird thing is back then it was the nakedness under the poncho. And like I said, I wasn't like totally like had a problem with nakedness. But in Mormonism, I knew that's not okay. So why am I
you're
all
taught
of a sudden?
your body's sacred, and now all of a sudden it's not.
And it's not even that, it's even worse, right? You need to strip down in the temple. And yes, it's same gender, right? There were no men on my side, it was all women, but they still touch you. And you just, I mean, at least for me, I can only speak from my experience, I felt so exposed, so vulnerable. Those ponchos were open on the side, and I mean, there's no underpants, there's no bra. You are utterly baby naked under those ponchos, right? So that was when I was like, does not feel right. Why do I be naked? And also, I did the temple prep class. Why did nobody told me about this? This is not okay in my mind, right? But as we all know, this really fast, the anointing thing, right, goes away. You get dressed, put your garments on for the first time, and then the women have to put on a veil. And in Germany, you have a lot of Muslims. I had friends, even girls who were Muslims, and they had head coverings. And I learned from them, it's about covering the hair. They're not supposed to see hair. So I'm sitting in the endowment session, struggling with the veil, keeping it up on my forehead so you don't see hair, right? Because nobody explained anything to me. So my stepmom next to me is like, what are you doing? And I'm like, well, the veil is not standing on my forehead. And she's like, nobody cares. And I was like, well, nobody told me. So you see how you blindly walk through your first endowment session. Nobody gives you any warning what's coming up. Then sure, I mean, I had to laugh when I see the guys and my dad, their costumes are not better than ours. And then to me, there were two more parts in the temple that just felt icky. It's the prayer circle. That was where I even later told my husband, don't ever ask me again. I don't want to do this. This just feels, I mean, now I would say wrong. Back then, it just felt icky. I was like, maybe I'm not spiritual enough, right? You blame yourself as a Mormon always. So I was like, I don't want to do this. I can't. This is not for me. And he was like, okay. And then the other thing is that the veil in Germany, you have a card and you read from it. So it feels kind of safe, at least in a way. You can follow what the veil person says. You can follow what the Mormon next to you says, and then you know exactly what to say. It was still weird why the order of the words were so important, like almost like a magic spell. Does it really matter so much? But that was Germany. Then when I went for the first time in the States through the temple, none of them had that. So I felt lost all of a sudden. Like I don't have the thing to hold on to, like, who tells me what to do. They didn't have it. So then you have elderly people most of the time whispering in your ear. I could not understand a word that elderly sister said. So I kept saying, what, excuse me. And she's like, shh. Where I'm like, what do you want me to do? I don't understand you. I have to tell you, you need to repeat yourself. And I could tell when I finally made it through the temple, she made this like big, kind of like, wow, that was awful. So, but what does it do to a person? I felt utterly stupid. Like I'm too dumb to walk through the veil that thousands of Mormons apparently do every day, right? My husband had it memorized because he was on a mission, went multiple times to the temple. I didn't. It just is not a nice feeling when you go through the temple and you feel stupid. So for me, that was not, I don't want to expose myself to that again. I mean, sure, you all might be uplifted. Maybe I'm just not as spiritual, but I can also be okay with that.
Did you start to think that the articles in the paper were maybe in the magazines were maybe more true than you thought?
Yes, that's what I thought, right? I was like, maybe I am in a cult. Maybe they were right. Because I can see how people that are non-Mormons feel like if they would know, right? Luckily, we all have to keep that secret, that sacred secret. But I was like, well, yeah, sure. If I'm not a Mormon, if like most of my best friends were not Mormons because they're just not enough. Like I said, there's only one girl. So all my friends in school were my best friends. I mean, not all, but my best friends were from my school and they were Mormons. And I'm like, if any of them would have seen what I just did, I would not even blame them that they think, girl, you know what you're doing? This looks creepy. And in a way, I was almost like relieved that I'm not allowed to talk about it. How convenient, right? I'm not allowed to talk about it. So I didn't have to even expose myself to others. So others could have maybe said, girl, that sounds really weird. What are you doing there? So it's my little dirty secret in a way, right? The temple experience is my dirty little secret. That's how it felt.
Can you just give us a 2-minute
Maybe what we
I'm-
can do is have her go to a certain spot, and we'll do a part 2. How about
I
that?
just want to say I'm happy to come back, and we'll take it where it goes, and I come back and we can make it second part.
That would be great. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm absolutely open for that. But I can speed it a little bit up because in between, so I got children, right? We're a good Mormon couple. There's not much that happened in between those years. When I got my third son, we had 3 boys. My husband was got an offer from his company to move to Singapore, and we both, since we lived in the States, were open to live abroad. Like we really liked this, so it was a great opportunity. Back then, we had to look on a map, right? Where the heck is Singapore? Even. And so we moved to Singapore when my third son was 8 weeks old. So that was also the first time. So we lived back then for a couple of years with his parents in his house before we had 2 apartments. But so that was for both of us the first time to actually be us, really alone abroad, right? No support system from families, which we used, and they were all great. And so we moved to Singapore, great country, we loved it. Big ward because so the whole country of Singapore is one stake, obviously not a lot of members. And the biggest ward in that stake is the expat ward. At least back then it was the expat ward. And so it's like 400 members, all successful, normally guys, right? Families who got transferred there for their companies, from their companies, and big families. I would say average like 5, 6 kids. Huge primary was the first time for us. Huge primary, lots of kids, great people, and all successful, right? No elderly, no sick, no who were needy, because those were all successful people there.
So we
So in a
brought
way,
you up to Singapore, and then next time you come, which will be shortly, we'll take it from Singapore and find out how you left the church, why you left the church, and introduce some of the spectacular content that you've been posting.
sounds good
Okay.
to me.
So thanks everybody for watching. Like and subscribe. Thanks, Jessie, for your time. And yes,
Always.
we'll have a part 2 shortly. We'll try to put this out soon, and then we'll figure out when we do the part 2, and we'll add that into our repertoire, our catalog of our cavalcade of stars. All right.
Sounds
Thanks a
good.
lot. Take
Thank
care of
you,
Thanks,
your
guys.
Jessie.
family,
You're awesome.
and
Sure
we'll talk to you
appreciate
later.
you coming.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Bye bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.